Aw yeah, Rivers here with some cool tech, and here we have the highly anticipated Minix Neo X7 Android mini PC. The first thing you'll notice when you take it out of the box is that it feels different than the Minix X5. It feels more solid and a bit heavier. The outside is made of soft touch plastic like the Apple TV now. The build quality just feels very good. Inside it's got the latest Rockchip 3188 quad-core CPU, Mali 400 quad-core GPU, 2 gigs of DDR3 DRAM, 16 gigs of NAND flash memory, external Wi-Fi antenna with 802.11 BG&N dual-band Wi-Fi, Android Jelly Bean 4.2.2, and Bluetooth 4.0. It's got a very nice selection of ports too. Over here on the back you can see it has an Ethernet port, 2 full-size USB ports, optical audio out, HDMI port, and a recovery mode button. Plus, on the side, you've got even more options with your OTG port, a full-size SD card slot, a full-size USB port, microphone in, headphone out, and power button. Here's everything that comes inside the box, including 2 different USB cables, a full-size HDMI cable, the remote, an antenna, and manual. The included IR remote gives you options like home, menu, back, volume up, volume down, and multi-directional movement for navigating the custom remote UI. It works great for navigating your apps, or for apps that are made for remotes like XBMC. And finally, it's got a working power button, which a lot of Android PCs really need. This puts it into sleep mode like an Apple TV or Western Digital TV. I tested it and it only uses about 1 watt or less of power while it's asleep. The X7 works really well with third-party remotes too. Here I hooked up a great little remote from Transmart, the TSM-01. It's an air mouse remote which works really well with more complicated tasks like web surfing. The built-in keyboard is a nice option too. Minix has a new air mouse remote coming out as well. I'll put a link to both remotes in the video description down below. Alright, now let's take a look at what you'll see the first time you boot up the X7. So this is the stock launcher. It's basically just Android 4.2.2 Jelly Bean. We'll take a look at some of the settings and options and then we'll do a couple benchmarks. So the first thing that I noticed is under Wi-Fi, I see a lot more of my neighbor's Wi-Fi networks than I ever have before. Next up we've got Bluetooth 4.0, which works well, I've tried it out, and we've got the Ethernet on and off switch for the port on the back. Another cool thing is the portable hotspot feature that doesn't work on most Android mini PCs works on Minix devices. So the way it works is you turn off the Wi-Fi, hook an Ethernet cable to your X7, and your X7 is now a portable Wi-Fi hotspot. I tested this and the range and speed were really both pretty good. So you could use this as a router as well, although I prefer it as a media player. Next up, under display, you have an option to select your default launcher. I know there's several ways to switch your default launcher, but this will be great for people new to Android who get frustrated when they lock in the wrong launcher. Next up, the display resolution is outputting at 1080p. This is currently running on a 720p kernel, which still looks awesome. There is also a 1080p kernel available, but it's older, so I wanted to have the latest firmware for the review. I'll add notes in the description as to my firmware recommendations as soon as I have time to test a couple of ROMs. And now one of my favorite parts, it's got 4 gigs for app storage, 10 gigs for data storage out of a total of 16 gigabytes available. Plus it takes SD cards up to 32 gigabytes, and I've tested it with a 2 terabyte USB hard drive without any problems. And finally, here's your Android version 4.2.2 and your kernel and build information. Now let's run a few tests on the X7. First, let's check out the Wi-Fi. I think the Wi-Fi on the X7 is the best I've seen on any Android mini PC so far. When I go into Wi-Fi Analyzer, I see a lot more networks available than on other devices. Also, it shows the signal strength as stronger than on a lot of other devices. The Wi-Fi chip on the X7 can run at either 2.4 GHz or 5 GHz band, so it's got even more speed options on there as well. Now let's check out some more information with CPU-Z. So here you can see it's an ARM Cortex A9 architecture. It's got 4 cores, and right now they're running at 1.4 GHz. It can go all the way up to 1.6 GHz. And over here you've got a little bit more system information. So you've got Android 4.2, 2 gigs of DRAM, Rockchip CPU. Next up, I ran Antutu Benchmark, which basically benchmarks the whole system. So it checks the CPU, the DRAM, the NAND, the GPU, everything. And we got a good solid score of 15,820. And finally I ran LinPack, which just does a quick CPU benchmark so you can compare it to other Android mini PCs, and it got a solid score of 125. I went ahead and installed some more resource intensive apps like Next Launcher 3D and this live wallpaper called Space Colony, but nothing really seemed to slow it down. The X7 held up very well, and even while running all this, still only uses 3 to 4 watts of power according to my watt meter. It stays very cool to the touch too, so hopefully that will help when I install a ROM with a 1080p kernel later. Another great thing about this device is that webcams are working pretty well on here. Most 4.22 devices don't have webcam support right now. I know of at least 5 Logitech devices that work on the X7, including the 920, which is a 1080p cam, and the 310, which is a great value cam. Here I'm running my old Logitech Quick Cam, which doesn't have that great of photo quality, but just to show that it does work. I'll put links to the webcams that I know work in the description down below. Next, I tested out Skype using my iPad and my wife in the other room. It worked, but the audio was a little buggy, probably because I'm using a non-supported Logitech Quick Cam. Stick to the supported cams and Skype should work for you. Also, I've read that support for my camera, the Logitech C525, should be coming to custom ROMs for the X7. Next, I wanted to try some gaming, so I plugged in my generic PS3 controller, went to settings and enabled it in language and input, and then configured the buttons in Shadowgun. I also tried my Xbox 360 controller, but it wouldn't work for me. Both controllers are corded USB controllers, but Bluetooth controllers should work if you use a third-party app like 6-Axis Controller. And finally, I've saved the best for last. Video on the Minix X7 is really good. It's liquid smooth, playing 1080p MKVs is no problem. Even home video shot in MTS format is pretty smooth on the X7. Here's a clip I shot on my Sony PJ710 camcorder, and it's just me walking down a path in the Sawtooths, but if you look in the properties, this clip is 1080p 60 frames a second. This clip really slows down a lot of other Android mini PCs, but the Minix X7 handled it pretty well, still maybe slightly slow. Home video footage is the hardest for any of these to play. MX Player and the Arcos video software both work great for playing HD videos. I actually prefer the Arcos video software just because the playback is so smooth on here and you can skip up through your movies pretty easily as well. Now, I've tested this on lots of different 1080p MKV movies and they seem to play really nice and smooth. I can't show that on YouTube here, so here's some footage I shot at the aquarium that you can kind of get an idea of how it looks. The only downside I found during my review is XBMC is still not fully hardware accelerated. You can make it work with the MX Player version of XBMC, but it's not quite there yet. And that's not Minix's fault, that's XBMC needs to get the hardware acceleration going. Now, on the plus side, the X7 has improved build quality, which feels even more solid. It's got butter smooth video, apps work great, and it's nice and stable. Webcams are now supported. It has a remote with a working power button, and it sips power at only 4 watts. Be sure to look down below in the video description. I'll put a link to the Minix X7 and all the hardware and software you saw in the video in there. Also, the X7 should have some custom ROMs available pretty soon. As soon as they come out, I'll put a link in the video description to where you can get them. I'll make another video showing some custom ROMs running on the X7 as soon as I get some more time. If you like this video and you want to see more like it, hit that subscribe button and you'll see my videos as soon as they come out. And don't forget to give this video a like, it'll really help me out a ton. Thanks for watching, and as always, aloha.